Hi, in this video we are going to create an AI travel planner which is able to take in the user's input using natural language, create a custom travel itinerary, and then send this information into Google Calendar. And I have created such an agent in the past and people have asked me to create a tutorial on this. However, what I came to realize is that it was missing two things. The first thing was that it was not really taking advantage of the AI part because it was just a bunch of questions that the user had to go through, and it was just a fancy form or a questionnaire, if you will. And the second thing is that it wasn't able to provide the user with this information after he has left the chat, right? So in this video, I'm going to improve on both of these points by, as I've said, using natural language, just asking one question, having the AI check in the background if we have all the information necessary, and then send all this information right into the user's Google Calendar. Now let's take a quick look at how this looks. So this is the interface I'm dealing with, and I'm going to start a new chat. By the way, this is my empty Google Calendar. And let's take a trip from the 13th to the 15th. And I'm going to start a new chat, and I'll be greeted with a short message that asks me to provide the destination and the arrival date, departure date, and so on. And this is within one question, right? So let's say I'll be staying in the Clarion Hotel in Stockholm from June to June 15th. Create a travel plan for this, please. And let's see what happens. All right, so this is our test output. So it did recognize the city, and the date is also correct, 13th to the 15th. And this is the address. Now, additional info not provided, and we are going to go into this in the tutorial, and your travel plan is ready. Now, let's take a look at the calendar. And here you can see that we have our custom travel plan, and which adheres exactly to what we have told it, right? It's from the 13th to the 15th. If you click on this event, then you even have the correct address from the location I gave it. And this is what we're going to build. And what you will need to rebuild this on your own are basically just three things. The first thing is Voiceflow, which will be our main tool and where we will build our conversational flow, and which also enables us to use ChatGPT or any other large language model. The second thing will be make.com, which will handle the Google Calendar integration and any other automation. And of course, a Google account so that we are able to send the events to this Google Calendar. All right, now the first step would be to head over to voiceflow.com, and if you haven't already, then you need to create an account for this, sign up or sign in. And if you have signed in, you are going to end up in your dashboard, which will be over here. Then you can just create a new agent. I have called mine Travel Planner Demo, and this is where you are going to end up. And we will jump right into the home and main flow, and there you will probably have a couple of demo templates. You can just select all of them and delete them because we're going to start from scratch. All right, now the first step would be to greet the user just really quickly. So we are going to take the text step and just enter really short greeting. Hi, I can help you create a perfect travel plan for you. Create a couple of variants of this, and ideal travel itinerary, plan the ultimate trip, perfect travel schedule. Yeah, these are all right. Just call this greeting, connect this to the starting point, and we're good to go. All right, now the next step would already be an AI step. And we are going to use the response AI step for this. So we're going to pull this in, connect it to our previous step. And let's call this ask for info, because this is what we're going to do. And I have already prepared a couple of prompts for this. And the first one will be the system prompt. And you can take a look at this, and I will share this in the description. We don't have to go through all of these, but you will see you are a travel planner. Your main task is to create a customized travel plan for the user, and so on and so forth. Now, this piece of information is something that I have already saved within a variable so that we are able to retrieve it all the time we need, right? So you have, when you jump into variables, a couple of variables already, which are created by default by Voiceflow. And here we have our system prompt. So this is a custom variable that I have created, and you can just give it the default value of our system prompt, because this is something that's not going to change or shouldn't change that often. Now, if we jump back into our workflows, then we can, if we select this, jump into the prompt settings, and down here you can see that this is our system prompt. And if I hit curly braces, then I get a selection of all the available variables, and I already get the system prompt suggestion. This is what I'm going to use, and now it will pull the information right into this field. Now, the next step would be to actually enter the prompt, right? The user prompt. Now, before we do this, we are going to jump back into the variables panel, because we are going to need a couple of them first. And the first one will be destination. The next one will be the arrival date. Then we have our departure date. And last but not least, accommodation unconfirmed. And what this means is going to be clear in a couple of minutes. One I forgot is additional info. And now we're able to refer to them in our prompt. All right, now let's jump back into our text document and have a look at the prompt itself, because this is quite important. We have told the AI model the following: ask the user to provide you with all the information you need to create the perfect travel plan for him, which is the destination, the arrival date, the departure date, and accommodation details. And you see that these are exactly the variables we have just created. This is the info he already gave you. And then we are able to refer to the variables we have just created. If any of the required ones are not provided, ask the user specifically for the missing piece or pieces of information. Keep your sentences short and your tone friendly. And this is going to become handy later, because this way we can loop through this and get or collect all the information that's missing, because we might ask the user to give us all this information, but he might forget something, or something might not be clear. And we're going to have a condition later on and check whether he did provide us with all the information we need. And if he did not, we are just going to jump back into this prompt, and then the AI will determine and define whether we have all the information we need. And this is exactly the flexibility we wanted to have by using the AI, because now you don't have to go through all the questions one by one, but you will let the AI do the heavy lifting. Let's jump back into Voiceflow, because there's actually one point I forgot when we created those variables, and we are going to jump back into our variables panel, and this is the default value. And we are going to go through all of them really quickly. And the default value will exactly be the one that we have told the AI in our prompt, which is not provided, right? So this will be the default value of our accommodation. Now these now all have the not provided default value, and it should recognize all the variables. as you can see by the color coding. Okay, so now we're telling the AI to tell the user to tell us again where he wants to go and what all the details of his destination are going to be. Now, the next step would obviously be to capture the response of what the user says. And we're just going to keep it like this, entire user reply, and save it into the last utterance variable. And what we're going to do now is to save or extract rather all the information that the user will give us within this utterance into separate variables. And again, we're going to let the AI do the heavy lifting for this. So the step would be to use the set AI this time, set AI block, put it over here, connect it to our flow. Let's call it AI extract data points. We'll jump into our model again. Call it set required variables. And we're going to use the AI model for this. In the prompt settings, we will use GPT-4o again. We can leave the temperature and max tokens. System prompt is going to be our system prompt from before again. And now we're going to set a couple of variables. And we're going to jump into our text doc again. We are going to have different prompts to extract all the different variables, right? And we're not going to go through all of them because they are basically the same, but only for the first one. You have just asked the user the following question. This is his response, and we're going to use the last utterance for this. We're telling the AI now to create a precise travel plan. You will need the following data: destination, date and times, accommodation, and so on and so forth. These are the same. We have already told it in the beginning. Now, analyze the user response in regards to the destination details. Check whether he mentioned the destinations. If so, output only the destination and nothing else. If he did not provide them, only output the phrase "not provided" and nothing else. And now you can see why this is kind of smart that we're doing this way, because we can now jump back into this prompt and then have the same values in regards to the not provided part, and the AI will again check whether the user has provided us with what we need. So we will jump back into our text doc, take this whole prompt until here, copy it, jump into Voiceflow, and now we're going to enter this into this field, and we're going to save this into our destination variable, right? Because in case he did mention this, the user did mention this, we are going to save this into the destination variable. Now, the next step is to create another variable, and this is going to be added down here at the bottom. And we're going to take the pretty similar prompt just in regards to the arrival date, right? And as I said, you can read through the whole thing on your own. So copy this, paste it here, and save this into the variable arrival date. Next part, add another variable, take the prompt, this time for the departure date, jump back into Voiceflow, save this in the departure date variable, add another one, accommodation details, select accommodation, additional info. Now we're all set with all the variables we need. All right, now the next step is going to be to check whether the user did provide us with all the information we need. So we're going to check if the variables do have a different value, another value other than not provided. And we're going to use a logic step for this, and then use the condition, put it after this block, connect it, and call it check for required data points. And as a first condition, we're going to say if the variable destination is not provided, and you need to be careful with this because it obviously has to be exactly what we entered before. And we're going to add another condition, which is also going to be a variable, but we're going to choose or, which variable, the arrival date, is not provided. Or if the departure date has the value of not provided. And finally, if the accommodation unconfirmed has the value of not provided. And we're going to hit the no match and then the path, and we can just leave it like this. We don't have to name it anything. We just leave it at else. Jump out of this. Now, what's going to happen if any of these values is still has the value, or any of these variables still has the value of not provided? Well, we are just going to jump back, and I'm going to even make this a little visual by looping. So it's going to jump back into the same prompt, so that way we have a very efficient conversation flow into the same prompt. Because remember, now it all makes sense, because we have asked the AI in this case that if any of these still has the value of not provided, then it will ask the user specifically for this required data point, right? So if in the answer or in the response, the user does give us some information like the destination and the arrival date, but is missing or forgets to mention the departure date, then we will know this because we have the value of not provided of the departure date. It will jump back into here, and the AI will also notice, well, we do have the destination, we do have the arrival date and maybe the accommodation, but the departure date is missing. So the AI will specifically ask the user for only the departure date, right? So we have a very efficient and flexible way of handling all the different use cases that might occur. All right, now we're going to continue with the else path. And remember, this is basically the one we would want to proceed with. Now comes a part which I am not going to show you in this video because it will get way too extensive and way too complex, but I have already created a tutorial about this, and this is within my video. I'm going to link this in the description, called Hotel Search Engine, how to create a hotel search engine. And this basically is going to be an API call, and I have already copied this before, and I'm just going to paste it right here, connect it to the else path. And what this does, just as a very short explanation, is that this is going to be an API call using the Google Maps API, and you will need an API key for this, and you have to provide a couple of parameters and headers and credentials for all of this. But as I said, I've already created a tutorial about this, and I will get into great detail about everything that you see here in this other video, so you can refer to this. But what this does is going to be it's going to give us a couple of information about a specific location in regards to the accommodation that the user might have told us, right? So if, for instance, and I've already prepared this as well, I'm going to open Google Maps for this so that you can have a very specific imagination what I'm talking about. If, for instance, the user would stay in San Francisco, so this is just an example, and he would stay in the Sunset Edwardian Bed and Breakfast. Then he would enter this into his message we have just asked him for, right? To provide us with the accommodation details, so where he would like to stay. Now we can use this information and use the API of Google to get us the exact address, the formatted address actually, of that specific location, right? So this will be important because this way we will have the exact address of that specific location, so we know that it's true, and we can put this also into our Google Calendar. And you will see at the end of this what this looks like, because this is going to make things very convenient for the user. Okay, now what we can do already is to test this whole flow. So we're going to take the text element or the text step again, connect this to the hopefully successful API path, just call this test, and we're going to say destination will be destination, and we will use the confirmed one. And by the way, these are variables I have created in the background that refer to the API call that we are doing in this step. So this is basically the confirmed address I have told you about, which we get from that API call. Additional info. Let's test this. All right, then hit R or play. And we can take a look at the variables on the left side. And here we have our greeting, and then hi there, let's get your travel plan sorted. Could you please provide me with the following details? So we would have to tweak this a little because this doesn't make sense that it's greeting twice, but anyway. Destination, arrival date, departure date. All right, let's keep this conversational. I'll be heading to San Francisco from June 26th to June 28th. I'll be staying at the Sunset Edwardian B&B. Hit enter, making the API call. Now, destination San Francisco, arrival date 26/6, and then look at this year. It's 2024 right now, and I have already expected this, and we're going to take care of this later on. And now, as you can see, I have just said Sunset Edwardian, right? And it's giving me an entire address. And this is exactly what I've said before, that we are able to get the exact address from that API call. So this is the accommodation confirmed, and this is the accommodation unconfirmed. So this is the user input, if you will, and this is what we got out of this API call. So let's check if this is actually the one. Head back to Google Maps, and I'm going to paste this address inside of there and see. And as you can see, this is exactly the same address, right? So you can see at this location, we have the Sunset Edwardian. All right, now we need to take care of this year thing, as you have seen, because this is quite important, obviously, if we want to put this into our calendar, right? Then we need to make sure that the dates are exactly correct. So what we are going to do, so as you have seen, we have just entered the day and month and nothing else. And this might be even conversational, right? Because you wouldn't, if you were chatting with a person, you wouldn't necessarily mention that year because everybody knows what year it is, obviously. However, the AI does not seem to know this by default. So what we're going to do is to use a very short snippet, and I've already created this in our flow. And this is just basically setting the date of today, so you know what that today is, to a variable, save this into a variable, and we are going to pass this into our prompt later on. And how we will do this is that we are just going to need another dev step. We are going to use the JavaScript step, put this at the very beginning, paste this code inside of here. And now we just need to create this variable. If we haven't already, let me just check. I think I did not. Yeah. So we need to create this, call it formatted date, create a new variable, and that's already it. And then we're able to use it in our flow. And I have already taken care of this in our prompts, I believe, when we were talking about the dates. And here you can see this. So we didn't talk about this explicitly before because we didn't want to go into too much detail, but this is what we have entered. So if he hasn't, the user, if he hasn't provided a year, take the current year, which is, and then we are going to use this variable. So going to use this, and the same thing with the departure date, right? So we have our formatted date here. All right. Great, so now it does know what year it is. So we have you also have it flexible and dynamically pulled, and we will be sure that this is even going to work in 1 or 2 years. All right, now we're almost done. We are going to need a last prompt where we will actually create the final plan. So we're going to use a set AI step for this again. Just put it behind the test block, connect it, and let's call this AI create final plan. And I have already prepared another prompt for this. This basically says that the user has provided now all necessary information. And then we are going to pass all the variables again. Now create a full travel plan according to the user's input above. Output your result, and this is a very important step. Output your result as a JSON response using the following structure. Then we get a specific structure, and this is actually output that is going to be the input of make.com. And we are going to use a webhook for this so that make.com will be able to handle this type of data and will then later on be able to pass this to the Google Calendar module, and we will see how this looks. So we can just use this prompt, paste it in here. We are going to save all of this, what the AI is going to output of this, into another variable, and let's just call this JSON plan, because this is the final plan. And this, by the way, is something quite important because you have to play around with this, because if you choose the for O model again, then this output might be too short for the amount of tokens you have available, because we only have 500 tokens available max. If you choose an older model, if you will, or a model that doesn't take up so many tokens, then you could get away with a lot more in regards to the maximum amount that you are able to use or are allowed to use. And then we're going to max it up to 2000, because the JSON that the AI is going to output here can get quite extensive, because obviously this would depend on the amount of data and on the length that the user is going to have his stay. And this is already it as for the final step. We have our hopefully final JSON that we are going to send into make.com. And the way we are going to do this will be by using an API step again. So we're heading to the dev block, pull in the API step, connect it, call it send to webhook, because this is what we're going to use, a webhook. change the request type to post, and the data we're going to send will be raw, and now just our JSON plan variable. And the content of this will be defined by the AI beforehand. Now, what we obviously need is going to be a URL that all of this data is going to be sent to. And this is something we will have to generate in make.com. And this will be our next step. All right, so what we need to do next is go to make.com. So I will go to make.com, and if you don't know what that is, just take a look at it. It's an automation workflow builder, and we are going to create an account if we don't have any yet. Otherwise, we will just log in. And if you are in your dashboard, and I've already prepared this, then you just jump over to create a new scenario, and then you will have your empty canvas over here. So we're just going to give it a name. So let's call it travel plan and calendar integration demo, so that we know what we are talking about. And the first module we are going to need would be the webhook. This is what we just talked about, right? Because we need to have a URL that we are able to hook into. So how this works is that we click on webhooks, and then we will choose the custom webhook, and we will create one, give it a name. So let's call this Voiceflow travel plan, just to know what we are talking about. And then we will take a look at the advanced settings, and we need to create a data structure first of all. And this means that the webhook knows what kind of input it has to deal with to be able to extract the data and then forward it or output it in a way that we can continue to work with it. And this is what we're going to do right now. And how this works is that we basically add a new data structure. Now, I have obviously already created a couple of them, and this is the one we are going to recreate just for demonstration purposes. We are going to start from scratch. So I'm going to add a new one and call it data structure, and let's call it JSON calendar, maybe template. And now what we can do is that we recreate this manually. But instead, what we can also do is to let Make take care of this. And the way this works is that we are going to click generate. We are going to choose the content type, which is a JSON, and then we are going to put in some sample data. And if you remember that this is the one we asked ChatGPT to create, right? And only to output this in this format. So this is the template that we are going to send in to Make using that webhook. So if we jump back and then copy and paste this as the sample data, and then we hit generate, then you will see that it already automatically generated exactly the structure we are going to need. And as you can see, the first parameter is an array, and within that array we have all the other types of data that we need, and even already with the same names and the same keys, right? So there we have our structure, and this will enable us to later on deal and extract exactly these specific data points, right? So we are going to hit save. And this is the data structure. We don't need any of this. We will have the JSON pass through, so it will be output as a string, and later on we can parse the JSON data. But for now, this is enough. And if we hit save, then you can see that Make automatically generated a URL. And this is exactly the one we are going to need, right? So we're going to copy this address to the clipboard and hit back to Voiceflow, and then jump into our API step. And now this is the URL we can paste in here, and which we will try out right now. All right, so now let's test this. So I'm just going to hit send request, and we will need to enter in or paste in some sample data, and obviously we would need or use the same one we have just pasted into the data structure in make. So this is just some sample data, paste it in here and hit generate, and we will see what happens. So we get it to 100, which is nice. And if we head back to the scenario, then you can see that this was successfully determined. And remember, before we had this spinning icon with the stop button, right? So it was basically listening and waiting for any data to come in. So this has happened right now, and now it does know the data structure and the webhook works. And this is what we know right now and can be assured that this works. All right, now the next step is that we are going to need a parser, and we are going to need the JSON parser for this. So look for JSON, and then we already have parse JSON, and this is exactly what we are going to need. And the data structure will be, of course, the one we have just created, and we call this JSON calendar template. And the JSON string that we are going to need for this is what the value of the webhook is going to be. And that we are able to actually extract exactly the data and the data points we need. Just hit OK, and that's already it for this step. Now the next thing will be to have an iterator. And an iterator is important because remember, what we are receiving will be an array, right? So if the user has asked for a plan that contains several entries, which it most likely will, then we need to iterate over the whole array. So over all the events that were created by ChatGPT. Remember, we have this events array, and there we have event A, event B, and so on and so forth. Then we want all of them to be retrieved by the Google Calendar module as separate events, right? And not as one event, one whole block. So we need to take care of this. And the array we're going to iterate over is just the events array that was output by the previous module. So just hit events, hit OK. And that's already it. All right, and now for the last step, which obviously will be to add the calendar module, the Google Calendar module, right? So just hit plus, type in calendar, Google Calendar, and we are going to create an event. Hit OK. And if you don't have a connection yet, just create one by clicking add, sign in with your Google credentials, and you will have created that connection. Create an event in detail. The calendar ID will be the one if you go to your Google Calendar, then you are able to create multiple calendars in here, right? And if you want to choose, or you would need to choose which one you would want to create the events in. I just have one, so I'm going to take the primary calendar, and that's it. Now, as for the event name, this is the part where we are able to retrieve the data we have just entered, right? So we're going to take the event name as the event name, obviously. Then we have our start date, which will be the start date time, the end time. And now you see why it makes sense to set up the prompt like this, right? To set up the ChatGPT output like this. The duration is optional, and what we want to add is hidden behind the advanced settings is to have the description, which will be this one, and finally the location, which is this one. And that's already it. Default reminders, you can choose that on your own, and all the default settings that you want to have that event, I'm just going to leave it as the default, and that's already it. All right, now let's test this. Save it first, hit Command S and save it, and then we're going to run it once and see what happens. Now, we have not sent any data yet, so the webhook will wait for any data to be sent into, right? So what we're going to do is just jump back into Voiceflow and resend the previous command again. Remember, we have tested this, right? We have our JSON plan variable, and so that we don't need to go through the whole flow yet, we are going to send a request, and this is the one that we're going to send. So if we jump back into our template, then we will take a look at this. Now we are going to change this. Remember, we would want to create, let's say, an event for tomorrow, let's say at 9 a.m. So I'm just going to change this. This is the 13th. And we're going to change this to 9 o'clock. I'm not sure about the time zone, to be honest, right now. I have the location, and event B will be on the 14th to the 14th, let's say at 3 p.m. until 3:30. Okay, now we are going to take this as our test request. Jump back into Voiceflow, paste it in here, and we're going to hit generate and see what happens. So we get a 200, which is great. And now if we jump back into make, then you will see that it was so fast that it has actually already retrieved some data. So let's take a look what it received. And this very much looks like the one we've just created, right? 13 from 9 to 11, and the second event is the 14th for half an hour. All right, this is the output. Then we have the parser, and let's see now. And now you see why this is fantastic, because this is exactly what we wanted, right? We have one bundle, but it has created two bundles within, or two collections within that events array, which are our separate events, right? And it extracted all the data points and the details we need to work with them and to continue working with them. Okay, this is working as well. We have our iterator here, total number of bundles, great. And then we have our calendar. And let's see, so we get the two bundles, we got the two bundles. So this looks great if you take a look at the data. All right, and if we go back into our calendar, then you can see that it did create all the necessary events, including the description, including the location, and the duration. Now, as you saw, or as you can see right now, this is not the correct time zone, so we need to be aware of this, so we need to adjust this, but this is just a little tweaking, but it definitely worked already. And we can go through the whole flow in Voiceflow right now and test this. All right, now before we test this, we need to do some preparations. First of all, I would like to delete the events we have just created, which I already did. And the second thing is that we need to activate this scenario so that it runs in the background and actually listens for the webhook to retrieve some data. So we're just going to activate it. We're going to delete the old data we have just received and click delete, and now it's active. And what I also want to do in Google Maps is just take out some hotel somewhere to enter this into ChatGPT. So let's assume I have, let's take New York City, and then look for hotels and look for something that is distinct in regards to its name so that we know it's going to be found. Let's take Delta Hotel, Basking Ridge, for instance. All right, now we will jump back to Voiceflow, hit S to jump back, and let's see what happens. Start and let the flow begin. I'll be in New York City from June 26th to 28th, and I'll stay in the Delta Hotel Basking Ridge and need a travel plan for this. All right, so we did get some information. Awesome. Okay, so destination New York City. The dates are correct. The accommodation is this one. We will take a look if this is correct. So let's go back to Google Maps, hit this up and see. Yes, and as you can see on this location, we do have the Delta Hotels Basking Ridge. Let's just take a look at the calendar. And we talked about the 26th and the 28th. And now look at this. We have all of our data here. Arrival in New York City, Central Park visit, Top of the Rock, Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island, and then departure. Obviously, we didn't add any times and didn't add any additional info, which we could have also done, right? Remember, we have this additional info field, so we could basically add our preferences in regards to food or in regards to sightseeing or whatever, but it worked perfectly. It did consider the date and the location, and now you can also see why it's nice to have this formatted address, because in Google Calendar, if you click on this to the Google Maps feature, and then you can see where you are, right? Awesome. So this worked perfectly. All right, now that's it. I think this is a really cool project and feature that enables AI automation. And you can, of course, extend this, right? You could add like weather information into that calendar event, or you could basically add contact infos of a specific location so that the user is able to book tickets, for instance. Let me know what you think about this project. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I hope to see you on the next one.